The Reign of Jahangir, Wars, Politics, and Legacy. The story of Emperor Jahangir, the fourth ruler of the Mughal Empire, begins not with his coronation, but with his early life as Prince Salim, the long-awaited son of the mighty Emperor Akbar. Born in 1569 at Fatehpur Sikri, after years of Akbar's prayers for an heir, Salim's arrival was seen as a divine blessing. His childhood was marked with grandeur, education, and constant exposure to the mechanics of empire building. For his father was a ruler not only of vast territories, but also of ideas. Akbar had carved out a dominion that extended across much of the Indian subcontinent, blending conquest with diplomacy, and Salim grew up in the heart of this imperial machine. Yet even as a young prince, Salim carried with him the traits that would later define his reign: an eagerness to assert independence, a love of beauty and art, and a certain weakness for indulgence that often stood in contrast to the disciplined vision of his father. The first significant conflict in Salim's life was not on the battlefield, but in the palace. His relationship with Akbar was strained by ambition and impatience. While still young, Salim began to form his own courtly circle of followers and advisors, gathering nobles, soldiers, and artists who looked to him as the future emperor. This independent behavior was viewed with suspicion by Akbar, who, though affectionate toward his son, was wary of his impulsiveness. Salim was eager to prove himself as a leader in war, but Akbar rarely entrusted him with significant independent command, perhaps fearing that granting too much power to the restless prince could destabilize the empire. By the late 1590s, as Akbar's health began to wane, Salim's impatience grew intolerable, and in 1599 he launched a rebellion against his father's authority by setting up an alternative court at Allahabad. This open defiance shocked the Mughal nobility, for it was rare for a crown prince to openly challenge such a formidable ruler while he still lived. The Allahabad rebellion was both political and symbolic. By minting coins and issuing orders in his own name, Prince Salim effectively declared himself emperor in his father's lifetime. However, he did not march directly against Akbar, perhaps out of lingering filial respect, or perhaps out of recognition that the empire's military machine was still loyal to the old monarch. Instead, he sought to establish his own zone of power, consolidating the fertile Ganges Valley under his control. The rebellion dragged on, but Akbar, in his wisdom, avoided direct confrontation with his son. Rather than plunge the empire into a civil war, he worked through diplomacy and persuasion, eventually reconciling with Salim and bringing him back into the fold. This reconciliation allowed for a relatively smooth succession when Akbar died in 1605, and Salim ascended the throne under the title Nuruddin Muhammad Jahangir Padshah Ghazi. Jahangir's accession was not without intrigue. Though Akbar had made clear his wish for Salim to succeed him, rival factions in the court supported other claimants, particularly Prince Khusrau, Jahangir's own son. Khusrau was popular among a section of nobles and had the sympathy of Akbar's influential courtiers. Shortly after Jahangir's enthronement, Khusrau rose in rebellion, marching toward Punjab in 1606 with the support of Sikh Guru Arjan Dev and a number of disaffected nobles. The confrontation between father and son mirrored Jahangir's own rebellion against Akbar, but Jahangir was determined to stamp out this challenge decisively. At the Battle of Pairawal, Jahangir's forces crushed Khusrau's army, capturing him along with many supporters. The punishment that followed was harsh. Khusrau was blinded to render him unfit for kingship, and Guru Arjan Dev, accused of supporting the rebellion, was executed, marking a turning point in Mughal-Sikh relations. This episode established Jahangir's reign on a foundation of both strength and cruelty. The emperor was known for his famous chain of justice, a golden chain hung outside the palace at Agra, which any subject could pull to seek the emperor's attention in matters of grievance. Jahangir prided himself on being a just ruler, personally, hearing petitions and passing judgments. Yet the same emperor who presented himself as a dispenser of fairness could be ruthless in punishing dissent, as seen in his treatment of Khusrau and Guru Arjan. This duality, justice combined with severity, became a hallmark of his administration. Jahangir inherited from Akbar a vast and largely stable empire, but his reign was far from peaceful. One of the earliest military challenges he faced came from the Rajput states. Though Akbar had established alliances with many Rajput rulers through diplomacy and marriage, not all Rajputs accepted Mughal supremacy. In 1613, the kingdom of Mewar, under Rana Amar Singh, son of the legendary Rana Pratap, continued to resist Mughal domination. Jahangir took this challenge seriously, dispatching Prince Khurram, later known as Shah Jahan, at the head of a massive army to subdue Mewar. The campaign was long and arduous, for the Rajputs of Mewar were masters of guerrilla warfare, retreating into the hills and forests whenever the Mughals advanced. Despite the difficulty, the relentless Mughal pressure eventually forced Rana Amar Singh into negotiations, and in 1615 he accepted terms of peace. Though Mewar was not annexed, Amar Singh agreed to recognize Mughal suzerainty, sending his son Karan Singh to serve at Jahangir's court. This settlement, achieved after decades of hostility between the Mughals and Mewar, was one of the most significant diplomatic successes of Jahangir's reign. While campaigns like the war against Mewar showcased Mughal strength, Jahangir's era also witnessed the growing influence of foreign powers. The Portuguese had already established themselves along the western coast, controlling ports and trade routes. But during Jahangir's reign, the English and Dutch began to appear more prominently. In 1615, Sir Thomas Roe arrived at Jahangir's court as an ambassador of King James I of England. Roe's mission was to secure trading rights for the English East India Company, and his accounts provide detailed descriptions of Jahangir's court life. The emperor, fascinated by foreign goods and eager to expand commerce, granted the English permission to trade, laying the foundation for a relationship that would grow more significant in later centuries. Yet if Jahangir's political dealings projected authority, his personal life often revealed the weaknesses of his character. He had a deep fondness for wine and opium, indulging in them to excess, which at times clouded his judgment and weakened his capacity to rule directly. Into this vacuum of imperial authority stepped Nur Jahan, Jahangir's powerful queen. Born as Mer-un-Nissa, the daughter of a Persian noble who had risen in Akbar's service, she married Jahangir in 1611 and quickly became the most influential woman in Mughal history. Intelligent, ambitious, and politically astute, Nur Jahan began to dominate court politics, issuing orders, granting favors, and even having coins struck in her name. She formed what came to be known as the Nur Jahan Junta, a faction of nobles loyal to her family and interests. Nur Jahan's influence was particularly visible in matters of succession. With Jahangir's health declining due to his addictions, the question of who would succeed him became critical. While Prince Khurram, the future Shah Jahan, was the most capable and favored by many nobles, Nur Jahan supported her son-in-law Shahryar, Jahangir's younger son by another wife. This rivalry led to conspiracies and open conflict within the imperial family. Prince Khurram, fearing that Nur Jahan's faction would sideline him, rebelled against his father in 1622. He gathered an army and waged war against the Mughal state, but Jahangir's forces defeated him after prolonged fighting. Though Khurram submitted, his relationship with his stepmother remained poisoned, and the succession question lingered unresolved. Externally, Jahangir faced his greatest challenge in the northwest, where the powerful Safavid dynasty of Persia contested Mughal control over Kandahar. In 1622, the Safavid ruler Shah Abbas I launched a campaign to seize Kandahar, a fortress city of immense strategic importance. Jahangir, distracted by internal rebellions and weakened by ill health, failed to mount an effective defense, and Kandahar was lost to the Persians. This defeat was a major blow to Mughal prestige, for Kandahar had been a prized possession since Akbar's time, serving as both a military outpost and a symbol of Mughal power in Central Asia. The loss highlighted the declining vigor of the empire under Jahangir, foreshadowing the more intense struggles of his successors. Despite these setbacks, Jahangir's reign cannot be defined solely by wars and politics. He was a lover of art, nature, and culture, and his patronage left a lasting mark on Mughal civilization. Jahangir kept a detailed memoir, the Tuzuk-i-Jahangiri, in which he recorded not only political events but also his observations on animals, plants, and the natural world. He had a keen eye for painting, encouraging a distinctive Mughal style that emphasized realism and delicate detail. Portraits, court scenes, and depictions of flora and fauna flourished under his patronage, making his reign one of the high points of Mughal art. By the late 1620s, Jahangir's health was failing rapidly. Weakened by years of addiction and illness, he traveled to Kashmir and the Punjab in hopes of recovery, but his condition worsened. On October 28, 1627, he died near Rajouri while returning from Kashmir. His body was taken to Lahore, where he was buried in a magnificent mausoleum built by Nur Jahan. His death marked the end of an era of relative stability and set the stage for a fierce contest over succession, which eventually saw Prince Khurram ascend the throne as Emperor Shah Jahan. Jahangir's legacy is complex. On the one hand, he maintained the empire he inherited from Akbar, suppressing rebellions, managing difficult relations with Rajputs, and sustaining the grandeur of the Mughal court. On the other hand, his reign exposed the vulnerabilities of the dynasty: succession struggles, over-reliance on powerful factions, and failures on the empire's frontiers. Yet his love of art and nature enriched Mughal culture immeasurably, and his partnership with Nur Jahan left a unique mark on the history of the subcontinent. Jahangir may not have been the conqueror his father was or the builder his son would be, but he embodied the contradictions of kingship in an empire at its zenith, majestic in appearance, yet fragile in its inner workings.